Get in on the action this season with Underdog's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Kia ora, Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, hey dude, there's been a trend with this team the past couple of seasons, and it's caused me to want to put a whole video into focus of this one topic, and it might end up being a topic that we hit every single year so long as we're in the Jim Harbaugh era. The bounce back Bolts narrative has become a very intriguing thing for Chargers fans. Honestly, it's awesome. In years past, we've seen some seasons where the Chargers maybe, really push the chips forward, sign a whole lot of big names. Maybe it doesn't work out the best for them. A lot of seasons, we go ahead and sign a whole bunch, especially in the Tom Telesco era, a whole bunch of Coupon Tom names that, sometimes get us through the season, but for the most part, doesn't really push us over the edge. This era of Jim Harbaugh and Ortiz and all of these guys really feels like we're in a new method of signing players, drafting players, bringing players in to find new life in their careers, to find a new ceiling, a new bar, and ultimately new production in the season, new impact for wins. And it's awesome to see because it's turned every single signing, every single move the Chargers make into a potential banger. Good examples of this, like we're seeing on screen, Teair Tart. He had a really rough start, bouncing between teams. Yeah, there's the Titans and the Dolphins. He was everywhere. Nobody wanted to bring him in because he had, let's say, a not so great work ethic. Well, the Chargers figured that out. He got a nice contract with us. He's going to be a nice piece of the defense this year. Elijah Molden was a great example last season. Struggling player with the Titans. You're going to see a lot of Titans on this list. Really put up some nice numbers with the Chargers last season in coverage. Got ourselves a nice contract. Poona Ford got a contract from the Rams. J.K. Dobbins with the Broncos. Christian Fulton with the Chiefs. Tony Jefferson. Lots and lots and lots of players brought themselves to the Chargers. If, let's say, they had a downward trajectory in their career, it all of a sudden bounced back up. And it spoke, man. I think the biggest proof that we have that it works is that money is starting to talk. Contracts are being handed out, and players are finding new life in their careers. So we're going to talk a bit about that in today's video. Players I think could bounce back with the Chargers in 2025, have an impact with the team, and honestly give us some great value like we saw last season with a lot of players that we just went over there. Before we do kick things off, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. Use code DIRECTOR to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Newcomers definitely take advantage of the pick on screen. It's a great way to support my platform while having some fun along the way. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Into the end zone, Charger fans are witnesses to history.
Your bounce back bolts for the 2025 season. Again, I may need to be covering this for a few seasons while we got Jim Harbaugh in the building because it's starting to become a constant. We'll have to see if it starts again this season with some of the names that we're going to list off here. So I got, 10 different guys I think could be the next bounce back bolt on the roster. And again, if it's anything like last season, we could see a handful of them. Anywhere between, what did we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this list. I know there was more that we could be looking at this season. So let's go ahead and start off with some of the guys that we brought in from the draft and undrafted free agency. DJ Ukulele, quarterback, most recently out of FSU, right? And this is a guy with a pretty I'm not going to say checkered past in terms of, where he was quarterback inside of it was more of, again, unmet potential. This was one of the most highly touted quarterbacks in the nation for a while. He was, whispered in the same breath as Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and he went to some pretty big programs that believed in that potential. Clemson, they were stoked to have the guy. didn't work out. Oregon State, maybe a bit of a better little stretch of games there for him, but still did not work out. He wanted to go to FSU and prove himself a top quarterback in the nation. You guys know how that season ended for that program. Very pitiful. Probably one of the worst I've seen in a while for FSU, and it's one that carries with it DJ Ukulele's story and why he went from potentially a top, day 1, day 2 pick in the NFL to undrafted in just a few seasons. It's a story that, again, feels very familiar to a lot of guys on their roster. Guys that had a lot of potential, did not meet up. There's another quarterback by the name of Trey Lance that's also competing for the Chargers QB3/practice squad that saw a lot of potential. Maybe the Chargers can unearth new life in these guys, and I think Ukulele is a very interesting I'm not going to say the name too much, it's hard to pronounce but I think it's a very interesting story because it is one of those guys that like we're seeing a lot on the roster, had a very big potential and a lot of spotlight all over him that just did not work out, this time coming in from undrafted free agency, and it's one that I think the Chargers may be able to do something with. Now again, all I'm saying is he's on this list because I think there's a shot that maybe he can compete for quarterback too. We're hearing a lot of good things out of camp, out of mini camp and OTAs so far. But I think at the very least, you're looking at a guy that could be that emergency QB3. You're looking at a guy that's probably competing with Trey Lance for those, snaps or those responsibilities. And it's one that I think he would maybe be up for. We're starting to see, some nice results out of him. And we're hoping to see, that bounce back like we saw all over the roster last season. So DJU, let's say, as they call him, is going to be our number 10 player on this list. Let's go to number 9 next. We got Benjamin StJuice. This is a very interesting player because, honestly, you take a look at this guy and you think to yourself, wow, we got ourselves an awesome perimeter corner that should bring, a lot of help in man coverage especially. But then you look at his last season, I think it was with the Washington Commanders, and it was a very disappointing season for him. He had a pretty solid 23 season. I'm going to say he had a pretty solid, career up until that point. But man, last season was so bad. Some of the worst, blown coverages in football last year was probably Benjamin StJuice. I know one of them was Mike Williams, who had a really bad year. He still scored on StJuice. It was one of the highlights that they put on his Welcome to the Chargers reel, which was hilarious. But StJuice, to me, again, the measurables are there. We talked a lot about him and Triquez Bridges a lot with these guys that could play perimeter or special teams roles that have the size and the athleticism that gets you excited. But we got to see an improvement in coverage, right? That drop in 2024 was pretty dramatic. But it's one that, again, fits the narrative of what the Chargers like to do. They bring in guys that are, once were really good. They've proven that they can be really good. They put them in a room with some of the best coaches in the NFL, and they see a bounce back season. I think Benjamin StJuice, who hasn't been talked about a lot, could be another one of those candidates that sees a bounce back season. He's a great run defending cornerback. I think that's something that's going to work in his favor in trying to make the 53 this season. He's huge at 6'3", 200 pounds. There's a lot to work with there, but can the coaches get it out of him? I think they might be able to. Jesse Minter has really proven to bring out the absolute best in his DBs throughout the last, 12 months now. It feels like this has been one of the craziest value seasons that we had seen out of the cornerback room, which was very concerning at the top of the season. They ended up doing just fine. I think that puts StJuice in a really good position to see a bounce-back season in 2025. Let's move on to our number 8 player, DeShawn Han, formerly of Miami, a whole bunch of places. Had a great 2023 season. Again, a lot like the guys, you're going to see a trend on this list, but kind of a dip in production in 2024. Now, to be fair, I think 2023 was a season where he was used in rotation a little bit more. I think it was with the Jets at that point, if I do remember correctly. In 23, he had an elite grade, man. He had a grade of 85 on PFF. He was the 8th ranked defensive lineman. Ranked among those guys on PFF, and it was awesome. But again, in rotation, kind of similar to what we saw with T.R. Tart last year, and that's why I think he could see a nice bounce back season in 2024 or 2025. Because he may be put in a similar position as T.R. Tart. What I'm kind of looking at from the Chargers defensive line right now is T.R. Tart maybe being pushed into the foreground like Poona Ford, the Poona Ford type role last season. And he could be the next Poona Ford, this T.R. Tart guy, man. He had a good season last year. He would be on this list had he not had a great season last year. He did awesome. I think he could end up being the next Poona Ford style story to really help that front. And then you need that guy that comes in rotation a lot. DeShawn Han could be that guy. And again, he's proven to be a very good player in that role. Can we see that happen this season? I think there's a really good shot at it. But again, with last season being a bit disappointing, he saw a dip in his grades. He saw way more snaps, maybe wasn't ready for the responsibility. I think the Chargers are going to help him bounce back this season quite well. All right. At number 7, a player that honestly, he's getting a lot of talk. Chargers fans, we've been more or less disappointed in Zion Johnson since he was drafted. It feels like the line has seen some huge improvements on each side, but we're hoping to see more from this former first-round pick. It feels like the Chargers have a plan for him. Again, it's kind of interesting because you see all over the roster some bounce back guys. Offensive line is kind of where I would expect to see some of the biggest improvement because of the coaching. And last season, it was better, but not as improved as I was hoping it would be given the circumstance and the situation with Jim Harbaugh, the offensive line whisperer and the guy that calls him the tip of the spear and one of the most important parts of the team. You were hoping to see a bigger impact there, and maybe that's coming this season. There are certainly plans put into place for Zion Johnson. Of course, he's one of the hardest working players on the team. Coach Harbaugh loves his work ethic. He loves him in terms of how he's coachable and all this stuff, but really at the end of the day, we need to see the results. They're trying him at center. There's been a bit of a competition between him and Andre James and Bradley Bozeman there. I'm going to say that it's maybe possible. Zion is a very high IQ player. There's a chance that maybe he is the guy that will be playing center for the Chargers this season. But more so, I just want to see that impact this year help improve him. And again, I think a bounce back candidate is certainly, a correct description of what we need from Zion. He's been more or less up and down, mostly down. And it's something that I think the Chargers can find something out of him this season. And I think the experimentation of him at center is going to do him a lot of good, too. So Zion Johnson, we're hoping and we're praying because if he can be that guy that we drafted in the first round, I think this offensive line may be one of the best in the entire league. All right, next up, moving into number 6 is Tyler Conklin. This one was tricky because I didn't quite want to put him on the list because I didn't think he quite needs a bounce-back season. I think he is what he is, and he's been very solid at what he's done his entire career. And I think he's going to do awesome on the Chargers, obviously. But the reason that he's on this list is, maybe a bit of a dip in production last season. Nothing crazy. He had 449 yards last season. His prior highs, I think the prior 3 seasons, he was between 550 yards and 620 yards. So, we saw a little bit of a dip there. He did score 4 touchdowns, which was a career high, if I remember correctly. But the reason he's on this list is because I really do think he's going to have a career high this season. Being the Chargers' number 1 tight end is a very, very big deal. When Justin Herbert's throwing you the ball, and if you're a competent football player, you're going to see targets, you're going to see opportunity, you're going to see production. And I think that Tyler Conklin is exactly the kind of player to bring that to the roster. You guys would be surprised, the reliability that we're going to see a tight end for the first time. I'm going to say in a while. We've seen some pretty good guys out there in the last few seasons. I think Will Dissly did fine last season. Hurst obviously was a disappointment. Gerald Everett was fine too. I think Jared Cook was underrated. But since Hunter Henry, I don't think we've really had anything too crazy in terms of stability at the tight end position. I think Conklin may be closer than a lot of us realize. And I think he may end up having a career year in the realm of 700 or 800 yards. And we'll see how many touchdowns that comes along the way with that. But Conklin, I do think he's going to see a bounce-back season this year, a career season, and one that sets him up nicely for a future contract either with the Chargers or with another team, as I think he was only 28 or 29 years old, so he's definitely got time to, reel in a couple more contracts if he wanted to. All right? That's kind of the story with the Chargers. Keep that in mind. That's the story with the Chargers. Next up at number 5, we kind of talked about this guy recently. He's jumped back onto my radar as we've gotten to minicamp and into OTAs. It's Justin Aboigbe. The man that we drafted in 2024, one of the favorite draft picks of Jim Harbaugh. He was very excited to add him to the squad, and unfortunately, we really didn't see anything from him. He had a lot of potential. The talent out of Alabama, if I'm to remember correctly, very, very strong, freakishly strong. The athletics looked really nice. He had some nice technique in his pass rush, and I think also very decent versus the run, but really didn't translate last season. We didn't see a whole lot of him, and we didn't, I don't think, need to see as much of him last year because of, the amount of players that we had all over the line between, guys that are gone now, Poona Ford, Morgan Fox, Joey Bosa. The vacancy has now opened up a little bit. A lot like with DeShawn Han, who we saw, in conversation earlier, that could be that new rotational piece. I think Justin Eboigbe could serve a role similar to guys like Morgan Fox last year, but more in a rotational role. And I do think it's going to be an important role to fill this season. The Chargers' defensive line maybe has the most question marks, outside of Jamari Caldwell and some of the signings. Nothing too crazy signed on the defensive line this season, which offers opportunity for guys like Justin Eboigbe to step in and be that guy. And again, he was a very exciting pick for Jim Harbaugh last season. The Chargers, they can get pretty, good at developing players. If we've seen anything from last year in the immediate turnaround, imagine what they can do with 1 year under their belt. So I think Eboigbe could sneakily make an impact this season. Again, we're not asking him to be, Aaron Donald out there, but we do want to see something out of these draft picks. And I think that the potential that we saw in Eboigbe when drafted is something that gets me excited enough to think he could bounce back in 2024 or 25. Excuse me. We have the 24 stats in front of us. All right, next up. Number 4, Andre James. This one actually might have gone a lot higher had we seen more from him in minicamp and OTAs, right? We saw a lot of different configurations of the offensive line during these offseason programs, and a lot of the times at the center position, you would see this, featured highlight or featured, competition between Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman. Not a lot of love for Andre James, who's been playing mainly with the second and third team. There's a reason for that. Andre James had a terrible 2024 season, the worst in his career, if I do recall. And the reason why likely the Raiders decided to cut him in the first place. But before that, this man was a staple. This was a locked and loaded, reliable center for that program, for that team for a long time. And I think that, is it too crazy to think those days are coming back in some shape or form? Now, it's something you work in favor of Andre James having a bounce back year that we've talked a little bit about in the past is the change of system in Vegas, right? They went from a predominant power run scheme to more of a zone run system, and it really did affect, I'm going to say, Andre James a lot. That and the Raiders, offense last season for the most part was just poo-poo, right? They had no idea what they're doing at quarterback. The offense was all over the place. They were trying to be that scrappy team, but it never really worked out for them, and ultimately everybody suffered on that offense. And Andre James, who was in the midst of a system swap, a scheme swap, and there's no more Josh Jacobs back there. There's no more archetype of running back that really fits that gap system that you're used to. He could see all of that return in this season with the Chargers. Now you got Najee Harris, welcome back, power run. Now you got Omarion Hampton, who definitely is going to run between the tag or in those gaps. And I really do feel like the Chargers offer Andre James that chance of second life, maybe more so than a lot of guys on this list. Coming into this system where he's been proven to be a really good part of an offensive line, I was kind of shocked to see him not pushed to the foreground as that new center in OTAs and in minicamp. Because I do believe that he really does stem a good shot at being the starting center this season. So keep an eye on Andre James. I really do think that the opportunity is here, and we got to see if he can capitalize on it. At number 3, we're at the top 3 already. Dante Jackson. This guy, dude, it was tricky for me because how do you feel a bounce back season when you already had 5 picks in 2024? The guy was awesome. I'm going to say in terms of turnovers for the Steelers, he looked great. But unfortunately, the coverage was not very good. The coverage was pretty bad. Maybe one of the worst seasons that he's ever had, and one of the reasons why he's likely not a Steeler anymore. But really, when I think about Dante Jackson, I think about his days in Carolina with the Panthers. He was great in that time with the Panthers. He was awesome. And I think he was maybe regarded as one of the better corners in the league at that time. And since then, and he's always had that, signature like interception guy. I think he only had one season, maybe it was injury or something there where he didn't, log a pick, but he's always had a few picks. He had quite a handful of them in Carolina. Of course, he had the 4 or 5 of them last season. I think we're going to get that guy, the guy that can capitalize in terms of turnover. But I do think, again, when you put him in a system with Jesse Minter, an environment where all the corners really did thrive last season, you may see something awesome from Dante Jackson this year. I expect him to be the Chargers cornerback too. He's got the speed, really. He's an awesome speed answer to guys in the league like Tyreek Hill, Hollywood Brown with the Chiefs, all these speed guys that we're seeing all over the league now. Dante Jackson could keep up with the best of them. He's a great interception weapon for the Chargers at corner. And honestly, I think if we can get that coverage grade up, which I do fully expect to happen with Jesse Minter, you may have a really nice cornerback going into the 25 season. Very good value, right? At number 2. Guys, hold on to your butts. Again, it depends on who I ask, but I get different reactions every time I bring up the name Quinton Johnson, okay? Now, I think in order for us to fully accept what's likely to happen this season, we also have to accept what happened last season, okay? He did see a pretty good bounce back year in 2024. It's not what we're all expecting. It's not what we're all hoping, but I think it was the next necessary step for Quinton Johnson in his NFL career. But we have to acknowledge he went from 430 yards in his rookie season to 711 yards. That's a pretty significant jump. He went from only 2 touchdowns in his rookie season to a whopping 8. That was one of the leading scorers in the NFL last season, sneakily. Not a lot of people realize that Quinton Johnson was a really, really good threat to score last season, and it was one of the best to do so. But the big concern still remains the drops. And it's going to remain this season too, guys. I hate to say it because, everyone wants to expect him to completely, wipe that off of his, record, get out there in the jugs machine and just not be a dropper of the football any longer. But I think part of Quinton Johnson that you have to accept is that you're going to see a few drops, right? But he's also going to provide some really good after the catch ability, obviously red zone ability. He scored 8 times last season, and he's going to be able to produce. But that jump from 23 to 24 was very good. Now I'm wondering, what's the jump going to look like from 24 to 25? Maybe we do see a drop, or I should say a dip in the drops. That's probably the better way to phrase it, where he doesn't drop as many footballs, where he is a little bit more sure-handed, but more so that he is just putting up points, putting up production. That's what we need from our wide receiver 2 at this point. And there's a huge competition all of a sudden, man. Quinton Johnson's really going to have to step up this season. Mike Williams is back. That's a bigger deal than I think a lot of us give him credit for. Of course, Trey Harris drafted in the 2nd round. There's a lot of expectations on what he could bring to the offense. Quinton Johnson could get pushed out if he doesn't have a very nice season this year. I think he knows that. I think there's danger of him not returning after his rookie contract expires next year, and there's something that the Chargers want to develop in him that he could be a really good weapon for. Imagine in the future you have Ladd McConkey, Trey Harris, and Quinton Johnson. Quinton Johnson could play a bit in the slot. He can play underneath that Z receiver that is great on a slant, catch and run sort of wide receiver, and it's the way that he needs to be utilized. We saw that way more last season. He wasn't that outside guy. He wasn't that 50-50 guy. He wasn't Mike Williams being forced, into that role. He was Quinton Johnson, and he found a lot more success, and I do expect to see a lot more of that this season in terms of his next step in the NFL. So I'm rooting for him. Again, we've already seen some drop problems in camp. It's been, maybe not a problem, but we've seen a few, and everybody drops a football. I think he's going to get more flack for it because of, some of the big drops that he's had over the last couple of seasons. But I do think, and I would expect him to have maybe his best season with the Chargers this season if he can step up and earn those reps over guys like, Mike Williams this year. So should be very interesting. And then finally at number 1, can you guys guess it? It was a player that, I almost put on my list last week in my video for underrated Chargers. But, it's one that I think I've talked a lot about. It's one that I think could end up being one of the biggest bounce back players of the season this year. And it's one that I think a lot of Chargers fans are heavily expecting to get more involved this year. It's Junior Coulson, who was drafted last season, one of the biggest, I would say, steals of the draft last season. Junior Coulson, of course, of Michigan, played with Jesse Minter, played with Jim Harbaugh, was one of the staples of that defense, that championship defense that honestly translated beautifully over to the Chargers in a lot of different ways. And Junior Coulson was one of the generals of that defense. He understood it better than anybody on the roster last season. He's a very intelligent football player, but I think a lot of people wrote him off because of his circumstances last year. Again, we didn't see Junior Coulson in the stat sheet where 100 tackles, and 4 sacks and 2 interceptions. And I think a lot of people said, well, okay, here's another bust, which is not the case with Junior Coulson. Remember, last year, before the season even started, he had an appendectomy performed. His appendix burst. Remember that? I think, was it his mama or somebody said, hey, he's got to get to the hospital right away. And he ended up having to get his appendix worked on. And that was during training camp, if I do remember correctly. And not too far after that, he comes back. He's working in. I think he ended up injuring his ankle. He had a hamstring injury he was working through as well. He only really started in 1 game last season. So in terms of sample size in the pros and the NFL, we have nothing right now. He was banged up big time. Now comes year 2 and an opportunity where I think you're going to see why Junior Coulson was so hyped up last season, why he was so, integral to the Michigan program in that national championship game or national championship season, and why Jesse Minter and him are such, on the same wavelength in terms of how they like to run the defense. It's going to be awesome, man. And I think another really big indicator that we could see that season is our other linebacker on the roster, Dayan Henley. Very similar stories if you're to look at that. Dayan Henley did not see a lot of playing time in his rookie season. Maybe a lot of people wrote him off. We didn't quite know what to think of what he was going to, produce in 24, contribute in 24, and then all of a sudden he comes out as one of the best linebackers in football. Man, this guy was awesome. And I think he's one of the more underrated players on the whole roster right now. I think you're going to see some crazy games from him this season, considering his growth in just 1 year. Junior Coulson is absolutely capable of the same narrative. I think he's going to definitely find a huge bounce back season this year, just from the simple fact that he has an opportunity to be on the field this year. Last season, he was banged up truly. He was not on the field. This year, I think just by being present, you're going to see a huge jump in his second season, and really see why he was so important to that Michigan program, why Jesse Minter and him dominated for a long time. And of course, having the reps and the mentorship in the NFL from some of those peers, Denzel Perryman, Khalil Mack, and of course Jim Harbaugh continued his journey with them. I do think you're going to see a huge season from Junior Coulson if he can stay on the field, which is very exciting because Junior Coulson, man, he could be that guy. He really could be that guy for the Chargers. In the middle of that field with Dan Henley, all of a sudden, man, the potential is awesome. You guys let me know in the comment section what you think of all that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up, stay frosty, mark my words. This is the year of Junior Coulson, baby. It's going to be an awesome one.